Everybody to this 4:30 Union County Water and Sewer District Board of Governors meeting. And I'll open it by talking about 22-556 minutes for approval. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, 22-549, amendment to the Union County Water and Sewer District rate and fee schedule related to certain miscellaneous fees and adoption of certain penalties. And I believe Andy Neff, Director of Water and Wastewater, is going to present.
Well, actually, you got me. So Andy's
Okay.
here if we have any technical questions, but if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'll go through this. So the Board of Commissioners has heard previously it's a proposal by our staff to implement two different programs, a cross-connection control program as well as an industrial pretreatment program. In those programs, there are required fees and penalties if the board so chooses to adopt those. And those allow for us to run and operate the program, as well as giving the ability for us to have some enforcement capability on the program, again, if the board chooses to adopt this. The nature of this is the Board of Governors, you are the ones who actually have to approve the fees and the penalties, and then the actual ordinance changes, which also includes the fees and penalties, will go to the Board of Commissioners at a later meeting tonight, if the board so chooses to approve these fees and these penalties. So I'll go over these with you, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. We'll start with the cross-connection ordinance and the fees and penalties. This is not changed from what we've shown previously. There are different tiers for what we have, and those tiers are based on whether or not it is a actual risk or potential risk. It's also based on the severity, and then how long it's taken for someone to actually act on it. So if, again, they're progressively worse if it takes longer for those individuals or those companies to act when it comes to correcting the issue. And as you can see, we try to start with at least a written notice that there's an issue first, give them some time to try and correct that. If they don't, then we start with the fines and the penalties, and we go from there. So you see what we have here is Tier 1 through Tier 7. The Tier 7 is termination of service, and that we don't take that lightly. If we terminate service, it's because those companies or individuals are ignoring our attempts to have this corrected. So any questions about the actual rates as far as the fines for that? Or not the rates, the fines for that. Any questions specifically?
Commissioner Rushing.
And this termination of service and this is on the irrigation.
Actually, this is for anything that's a violation of the cross-connection ordinance. It's not just irrigation. Cross-connection, there's a lot that goes to it, obviously, but part of it is the irrigation component, where we have individuals that are required to install a black flow preventer. They are required to have that tested, and those results are given to us if those property owners that do have an irrigation system, they don't have it tested or they don't turn in those results, and we continue to try and get them to come into compliance, then it could reach the point of termination of service. Now understand, every property owner who has an irrigation system has the ability to disconnect their irrigation system and not be part of that program. If they don't have an irrigation system, or if it's disconnected and they're not using it, then they don't have to be part of the cross-connection control program for that aspect of it.
Well, maybe I'm confused then.
Okay.
So if they're not part of the irrigation, for example, I don't have irrigation on mine,
Right.
then I don't have to have it inspected?
Nope.
No.
You sure don't. If you don't have a backflow preventer, and you are not actually irrigating, then there is no inspection that has to be done. There's no cost that you have to incur for that.
So you're just, but this So if I do have irrigation and I'm not having it inspected, or if something happens, then I get my irrigation and my drinking water cut off.
It could be. It could get to that level, yes, sir, if you refuse. And again, this, as you can see, there is multiple steps here. And so, yes, sir.
Brian, there's two different accounts there, and I don't see residential water being cut off. I see the non-compliant tap being cut off. Isn't that right, Andy?
We got to understand there's only 1 meter.
No, well, but I'm talking about.
Well, yes, if there's 2 meters, there's a meter for the water, domestic, and then there's a meter for the irrigation. Absolutely, yeah.
Let me
you're
explain
correct.
something, not that I'm the expert, but I had my son-in-law put in a second tap for his irrigation.
Right.
Because until you do that, you're paying sewer treatment on water to water your grass.
Right. I do want to stress, though, that there are plenty of systems out there that do not have a second meter. They have 1 meter, and they have an irrigation system. And those were done prior to 2009. The rules have changed. You now have to have backflow preventer, second meter to run that irrigation system. Those individuals who have that set up will have to have a backflow preventer installed. They don't have to have a second meter, but if they refuse, there is a situation where their
Right.
domestic water could be disconnected if that gets to that level of, they just ignore our attempts. Did
At the
that answer your
time-
question, Commissioner Rushing? No, it did not.
At the time my son-in-law did it, I showed him how in 3 years the additional sewer treatment would pay for the tap cost at that time. I mean, it's a very fast return on your money. So, and I used to build houses, Commissioner Rushing. Every house that's final now, before it gets a CO, it has to have a check valve on every outside spigot that you hook a water hose to.
Okay.
So that if you hook it up to a pesticide and the water hose and leave the water on and lay it down, the sun comes out and increases pressure, it can pump that poison back into the house. Well, that check valve, and they cost about $10 for a spigot. It will bleed it out on the ground. I mean, there's steps like this that's been going on for years. And it's all about it, making sure the integrity of our system. And I believe I talked to Commissioner Simpson. He said this all started in Flint, Michigan, and it's going to eventually spread all over the country, where we're going to be in charge of making sure our drinking water is very safe.
Commissioner Rushing, you shook your head. Is there something else I can answer for you?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, yeah, the concerns I have, I guess, with it are, you know, just like you were saying with the spigots, just, can we go back to houses with spigots and make them change their spigots? Do we have to have those inspected every year? It's just going back and telling a group of people in the county they have to do something. And I understand why they do it. I understand the necessity. But at the same time, you know, I could just see that being maybe a hardship for some people, depending on the cost of the annual inspections or semi-annual inspections or
I
biannual.
certainly understand, and that's why, again, any property owner can disconnect their irrigation system, and they don't have to participate.
But you're saying some are connected together.
They are, and they could do exactly the same thing. They could have their irrigation system disconnected.
Oh, okay, so they can disconnect it from the meter.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
If it's a single meter.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Whether you have a dual meter or whether you have single, you can still disconnect that. Now, obviously, we have to take it upon their word that they're disconnecting their system. We can watch their bills to see if their water usage is consistent with that, but again, they have that ability to say, I'm disconnecting, I am not going to irrigate my property any longer.
And Commissioner Williams added, and I think we approved it, instead of every year, it's every 2 years, so that would be.
So that would be part of the
biannually.
ordinance requirements. Well, the board did
Yeah.
ask, can you do this on a less frequent basis? And we did investigate that, and we can do it's every other year. that the inspection and the testing has to be done, and that's submitted to us. So that's not an annual cost, it's a biannual cost, or every other year cost that those property owners have to incur. And that's part of the ordinance. That the Board of Governors doesn't necessarily adopt that part of it, but as part of the ordinance that the Board of Commissioners will see, that's part of that requirement.
And just to reiterate, this enforcement proposal, it's being driven not by us, but by statutory and administrative
Certainly.
requirements at the federal and state level, right?
Yes, sir.
And if we were not to come up with our own enforcement regime, one eventually would be imposed on us, right?
That's my
Is that fair
opinion.
to say?
That's my opinion, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'll be supporting it.
All right, so that there are also program fees. So those were the penalties that anyone that refuses to comply with would have to, they would be subject to. The program fees are what actually help the program and maintain our involvement on that. So there's three program fees. One is the actual inspection fee for businesses. That's not for residential properties. That is where we have businesses that have the backflow preventers and the things that we have to inspect for those commercial operations. The second one is the plan review fee. Whenever we're having a commercial property that is going through the development process, we have to review those, and that plan review fee is $45. That is what we're requesting at this point in time. And then the third is the orientation class fee. That's for us to provide training to those individuals that will do the inspection and testing for those residential properties where they're having to go out, check the backflow preventers, provide a test results for that. That is to make sure that they are compliant with our requirements for meeting those inspections. And those are the three program fees for the cross-connection program. Any questions about those?
I want to ask Andy a question. I think it would help a lot of the commissioners. Andy, for all commercial and restaurants, that little beige or light green doghouse looking thing or well cover you see out on the street, that's where their backflow preventer and all that's housed, isn't it?
It sounds like it, yes, sir.
Sir?
Yes,
It
sir.
sounds like it, yes, sir.
Yeah, and so commercial establishments have been doing it for several years now.
They have those in place. We not necessarily been charging for the inspection and the program. That's what we have not really been doing. And this gives us the mechanism to now make that a formal requirement.
But the inspection is part of us trying to stay ahead of a federal mandate.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions about the cross-connection program? Okay. The board can choose to take action on this individually or however you want to do it. I can go into the IPP program and talk about that. What is your pleasure? How would you like to approach this?
I'll make a motion to approve the program fees for cross-contamination as presented to us today,
Can you also add the enforcement cost for that, sir?
and the enforcement costs too. But I would hope citizens would respond when they got that first violation.
Yes, sir.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All right. Next one is our industrial pretreatment program. This is really the sewer side. So the cross-control connection was the water side. This is on the sewer side, and this is industrial. This is not for residential properties. This is about enforcement and a program to make sure that we keep up with the waste that's coming from our industrial and our commercial users. We have been doing these things on voluntary basis, but we really don't have an enforcement program that gives us a lot of teeth, and that's what this is. Gives us some teeth, gives us the ability to provide some fines and penalties if these businesses don't comply. Now, and Andy, please correct me if I'm wrong, we don't project any surcharges at this point in time for the board to implement for these waste streams. In the future, however, we may very well have some industries that have waste that is to some level where we have to charge a surcharge.
That is correct.
And at that point in time, we will come back to the board, we'll ask for those surcharges, we'll show you what they are and tell you what they are. But right now, we don't have an industry or any industry that meets those levels, so we're not asking the board to consider any surcharges. This is really putting the enforcement component of the program together. There are no program fees at this, but the enforcement side of it's what we're asking the board to consider. So as you can see, it's the same thing. They're different tiers. They go all the way up to a very high number. Again, our goal is not to collect money. This is to bring these folks into compliance. Notify them first of what the deficiency is, give them time to correct it, and then escalate it as necessary when they are not complying. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, but what we have in front of you are the 7 tiers for the enforcement portion of the program.
Okay, I have a question for Andy. Andy, is the ultimate goal of this enforcement to make sure that people are not putting stuff in the sewer system that we can't treat in our plants?
That's correct. Not only can we not treat it potentially, but it could actually harm the plant, harm the process within the plant.
Right.
And can be a pass-through, can show up on the other side in a receiving stream. That could be a problem from a pollutant standpoint.
I mean, I know on restaurants, they have to spend a good bit of money to collect the grease that
Fats,
comes
oils.
off the plates.
Yep, fats, oil, and grease, yes, sir.
Right, and I know that just messes up our whole sewage treatment process.
It does. And the average person doesn't understand, and I only know a little because they teach me, but your wastewater treatment plant is somewhat of a delicate balance. You've got the bugs, as they call them, that helps to reduce your waste, to get your waste to what it needs to be, and then you treat it with the chemical so that you can discharge it. And if you get that out of balance, then you're not going to meet your discharge limits. And that's what Andy was talking about. If you get some of these folks discharging things into our system that cause our plant to be disruptive, it is potentially a fine on us by the state because we're not meeting our discharge limits. So,
You need an action on this.
Brian, is there a definition that says meet with industry representatives? Is there a definition of industry?
It would be who we're regulating. So what that refers to is that we would be meeting with the people that caused the issue and discussing it with them up front.
Okay, and the only reason it just gave me pause was you got fines of up to $25,000. You could have a small industry that would bankrupt them. Where
then hopefully
a bigger industry may just thumb their nose at you and pay the fine and move right on. So just a thought.
It is possible. Hopefully then at tier 1 and tier 2,
Get
we
their
don't get to the
attention. I
level
understand.
where we're tier 7.
Understand.
And that is certainly the hope, but also I'd like to point out that these tiers are consistent with state guidelines. So we're following the state model ordinance.
Okay, great.
With regard to these.
Great. Not just arbitrary. Thank you.
No.
Any other questions? Now, you say we're not doing this, but it seems like I've heard at Pilgrim's Pride, don't they pre-treat their stuff to get some of the stuff out?
Go ahead.
I'm not certain what Pilgrim's Pride does with their sewage pretreatment, but I know that whatever they discharge is discharged into the east side transmission system that ends up in the city of Monroe's treatment plant. So the city of Monroe regulates their waste stream through their industrial pretreatment program, just like we're setting up here.
But I mean, some sort of monitoring is going on there now.
That's correct.
Yes, the city of Monroe handles that.
And they do, I believe, have surcharges, if I'm
They
not
do.
mistaken.
But
So-
they would charge us, wouldn't
That's
they?
correct, yes, sir.
Right. So that would be another good thing.
Yep.
Any other discussion before we have a motion? Okay, pop those fees back up there.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Or the enforcements. I'll make a motion to approve the enforcement with the IPP and all tier 1 through 7. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, that's all we have for you tonight. We certainly appreciate the board's consideration of this, and as I said, the Board of Commissioners will then have at our meeting later on tonight the ordinance requirements as well as these penalties and fees in there. Thank you again for your time.
Motion to adjourn the Union County Water and Sewer District Board of Governors. All in favor? Aye.